viewers, welcome to the morning program, The Dailies on Echo Television International. Today is the 31st of October, 2022. And I do not know what your plans have been from the beginning of the year to this time, but I want to reassure you that you can still make that plan. The next 2 months to end this year is still there, so you can actually have your plans actualized. I'm Stella Elisha Dasham, your host, and my co-host is Rachel Tansi. Good morning, Rachel.
Good morning, Stella.
How was the weekend?
It was fine.
You are feeling much more better.
I am.
I'm really happy and excited
Thank
for
you.
that. All right. Remember, we're live on Facebook and also on YouTube. You can drop your contribution and also your comment there. And later on the show, we will open the phone lines where you can actually call us and let us hear what you feel about most of the stories that are on the papers, especially the redesign of the Naira notes. And I'll be starting with the first paper, which is This Day newspaper. The big story says, President CBN has my backing to redesign the Naira notes. And we have under that said, people with illicit money buried under the soil will have a challenge with this, but workers, businesses with legitimate incomes will face no difficulty at all. Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Finance is on board of the CBN to ensure effective coordination. And you can read that on the front page and also on page 5. And this has been a conversation that has been going on from, I think, from last week.
Yes.
We've been looking at the back and forth concerning the Naira note. And there have been a lot of reactions coming from Nigerians. And even the Minister of Finance was saying she was not aware of the redesign of the currency note, that she heard that from the media. But here we are seeing that the president is saying
yes.
the CBN has his backing, even though people are of the opinion that in as much as, yes, redesigning the Naira note will actually do us great,
Yes.
because there are a lot of people that are hodling these old Naira notes. Like we can see here, the president is saying some people have even buried the Naira
money,
note,
true.
and hoping to use it for either vote buying, especially the election that is coming, or for other illegal, means. But then we have to also look at it at this point in time in the economy. Change of, or will I say, redesigning of the currency note came up. You can imagine how much Naira is right now.
Yes.
How much is, I think about $1 is about 750, 760 Naira
Yes.
per dollar. So you could see that it keeps, it's more like redesigning it will really affect the value of our Naira. Even though it will take it will take some time for it to be balanced, but you have to look at the effect, especially people who are running businesses presently now. What will it look like? Let's take a look at presently now. We are still having the issue of fuel scarcity.
Yeah.
I remember last week we had where they said they had given us 48 hours, there will be no queues. But the queues are increasing. Presently right now, a liter of fuel is over 300 and more in some filling stations. So you could see that there are a lot of conversation right now that we need to have. Even though in as much as it's good that we change the Naira note, but then is it the right timing presently right now? I think this is something we need to ask ourselves, and I think the CBN and also the presidency need to look into at this point in time. Is this the right time to actually redesign the Naira note? So we hope to hear answers coming up, even though we're having analysts, experts talking about that, but we'll keep our fingers crossed, and we hope that at the end of the day, this will not affect our economy badly.
The question is, will this be sustainable? It's understood that you're trying we stop doing temporary things in this country. It's high time we stop finding solutions to problems that will only last for a short while. If this change will, let's say maybe for a start, our dollar will go high. I mean, our exchange rate to the dollar will go high. But then we need help that 3 years later, we can have our dollar back at 300 Naira. Will it? Or is just like, these are some of the questions that as Nigerians, we need answers. Experts need to come and analyze this for us. The CBN need to come and tell us this is the impact. We don't want short results. We want sustainable things. We don't want short-term solutions. We want long-term solutions that even years later we'll be seeing that, actually changing this Naira was actually good for this country, and we can see its effect on our economy, but not just something for a short period of time. Like, if if it's just to make people bring out the money they feed outside so that EFCC will this thing, and it's not good enough. We need something very sustainable.
Well, we'll just keep our fingers crossed on that. Let's look at other stories still on this day newspaper. We have Obabina calls for collective action to salvage the education sector. Honored as the GCU Mariner of the Century, Omoto, there is growing distrust in the value of our academic certificate, and I think this is really a good conversation that we need to have on how we need to save our education sector, because this is a sector that has been really suffering. We know some public universities are actually opening up today. Others will be looking up to next year. So we just hope that all that is needed to do to make sure that our education sector is really, really well taken care of, because I always say that this is the bedrock of any growth in any society. For any society to grow, the educational sector needs to be given proper attention. And I hope that that is part of the agenda, that anybody, the incoming president or the governors, or regardless of what position you're aspiring, this should be one of your main priorities when you come to govern the country. So we'll keep our fingers crossed on that. Fashoda is saying the federal government yet to determine the extent of damage to road infrastructure by the raging floods. I think this is too late. The federal government really, really need to know that. I mean, especially looking at the local jail, lots of people's goods have been stocked as a result of the bad road that was led by the flood, or the bad road was actually there before the flood, and then the flood now added made it more, dangerous, or even added more salt to the injury. So we hope that by now the federal government should have known the extent of the damages that has been done by the roads, and then what we need to do, because each time I think about the destruction this flood have done, I mean, it's really, really sad, and it will tell in the long-term run. So I hope that we look into that too. Atiku mocks and APC says the ruling party can't campaign on issues, and that you can find on page 12 of this day newspaper. Tinubu is saying Buhari declined to nominate my running mate. Afenifere divided as Faro. I take that again. Afenifere divided as Fatoronti. Others endorse the Lagos governor Adebanjo insist on Obi. Other story downside of the paper. Harua urges the EFCC to probe Adamu over 20 billion naira party funds. So we hope to see more of that. The picture story here, we can see the SEG blesses Tinubu's lifelong ambition. So if you're interested in any of the story, you can do well to go to any newspaper stand, grab this day newspaper and read detail of that.
On the Daily Independent, Southeast governors decry spate of kidnapping killings in the region, says political solution still possible in Kanu's case. Tinubu to Afenifere, Buhari not proved Nigerian can survive its unity. And the big story is on the Naira redesign. Fare heightens as $1 may spike beyond 1,000 Naira soon. Analysts see kidnappers experiencing hard time, say move may create unintended consequences. CBN has my backing to redesign Naira. This is coming from Buhari. And then Buhari summons security chiefs over terror threat. And you can read all of that on page 3. Wike dares IU to stop autumn senatorial ambition. CUPP says IU on a mission to destroy PDP. Military kills 8 Boko Haram terrorists, captures 3 in Niger. NAFDAC debunks allegation of 40% mercury in children's vaccine, and you can read that on page 6. Serap asks Atiku, Obi, Tinubu and others to publish sources of campaign funding, and you can read that on page 7. Still on the Daily Independent, BPE blames TSA minister for delaying 1.8 billion naira pay of ex-SACO staff, and the writer says former workers plan to disrupt aviation sector. And that's all the news on the Daily Independent.
Let's take a look at the Guardian newspaper. Afenifere divided on Tinubu Obi as Fatoronti hosts the APC candidate, which you can read on page 6. Buhari banks the CBN governor on Naira redesign, meets service chief to review security. The big money, big story here, which is in 2023, economy in dire strain, OPS tells candidates go beyond rhetorical. And then we have doubts persist over the immediate subsidy removal by next government. Tinubu, Atiku, Obi are pro-market reformers good for the economy, says Uzum. So you can actually read that on the front page and more on page 6. Falana demands information over the 7 billion naira petrol tracking technology contract. And I think we all need to see that contract too. We need accountability coming from that sector. Aviation workers issue MMA to 7-day picket notice over mass sack. And the federal government and African Development Bank plan $1 billion innovation on climate change solution. And we have on terror alert, youth leaders allege plot to kill Kanos, which you can read also inside the paper. Downside, we have the weekly security review that was from last week, Monday. That's October the 24th to yesterday, October 30th. So you can do well to read more about that security review. And that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On the Matrix newspaper, still on terror alert, Buhari summons emergency security meeting for Monday. Kidnapped former Enugu SSG, UNN students regain freedom. Arsenal return to EPL summit after trashing Nottingham Forest 5-0. Over 8,352.94 kilometer roads constructed, 339,955 jobs created under Buhari's administration. This is coming from Fashola. And the big story on the metrics, Naira notes the redesign. Why I gave CBN approval. This is coming from Buhari. And the writer says policy is targeted at those with illicit funds buried under the soil. Emefiele convinced me that the economy stands to benefit from the policy. Obi will get 99% vote in Southeast. Rival parties will not get a chance. This is coming from a support group. New body of lawyers emerge as Law Society of Nigeria. Transportation Master Plan. Ganduje inaugurate 100 buses and 50 taxis in Kano. My gratuity not enough to pay ransom. Wife of kidnapped UI Don pleads. And there's a picture story and then blessing to lead the nation. APC presidential candidate and ex-Lagos State Governor Bola Tinubu receives the blessing of a Fenefera leader, Pa Ruben Fasoranti in Ondo State on October the 30th. And the last story, IGP waves of news of terror attack in Abuja. And that's all the news on the Matrix.
You know, on that front, that story you read of some jobs that have been created. There's this writer under it that said, my priority are Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, Second Niger Bridge, and then Abuja-Kanu Road. This is coming from President Muhammadu Buhari. And I hope that he expands to other routes that are actually there. I mean, take for instance the Lokoja road that we know that most goods that leave the north, the middle belt to over the southeast and all of that, and then goods also coming from over there. We know the effects of that bad road over there. And other parts, I mean, we had callers last week that keep, you know, drawing our attention to some bad, you know, roads around. So apart from the fact that these roads are really, really important, but I think that we also need to look at other routes, because take a look at even though we take a look at the Abuja route, which is also part of it. I'm happy that he has reflected that, but then we also need to look at other routes actually in the nation that really have become a soft spot to terrorists. Well, let's look at other papers, which is the Daily Times newspaper. The first story here, allow judiciary to perform its functions. Chief Justice of Nigeria admonishes politicians, which you can find on the Daily Times newspaper. The big story says, Plan Naira redesign, CBN has my backing coming from the Buhari, and Apex Bank explained benefit of the Plan Naira redesign policy, urges Nigerians to support the project as mixed reaction trade the move. Still on terror threat, Buhari convenes emergency security meeting. Under Malemi, Justice Ministry unaccounted for 2.2 billion naira service wide votes collection. We still have on the issue of insecurity, Southeast governors deny link with the ESN, agree on 24-hour joint patrol in zone, relate brief belief in the political solution with regard to Nnamdi Kanu, which you can actually find more of that story inside the Daily Times newspaper. How Nigerians are maltreated on board by foreign airlines. This you can read on page 4. And this has been, I think, a conversation that even the CBN governor said last week when he was talking about some of the foreign airlines we have. Sometimes they're not even allowed to land properly and all of that. So if you're interested to know all about that, I think you read that on page 4. And I think this should help us also work on our own aviation sector, so I'll be treated with respect when we go to other nations. We have a picture story where we can see the aspiring president of the PDP. That's the former Vice President Atiku with other stakeholders. So you can grab the paper to read any of the story that's of interest to you.
On the Abuja Inquirer, Tinubu will win 2023, says Afenifere as they endorse him. No end in sight with PDP crisis. And the big story, how Abuja survived under terror alert. The writer says bars residents closed early. FCTA delivers operational vehicles to police. Vigilante prohibited from carrying firearms in FCT. And then there's still on the Naira redesign palaver. Buhari backs Emefiele over minister, and there are picture stories there, and if you want to know what they are all about, get the Abuja Inquirer for yourself. And that's all the news on the Abuja Inquirer.
All right, let's take a look at the Business AM newspaper. Developer of $600 million geometric power tucks up Aba as project site, and the writer following that says city economy, technological potential great, rules project of 9-year right ownership tussle, which you can read on page 4 of the Business AM newspaper. Still on the Business AM, we have food energy crisis to get worse coming from the World Bank. Hedge inflation with Euro bonds, this and stock, which you can find on the Business and Investment. Still on Business AM, on gas and Nigerian energy transition. You can read that on page 10. The big story for the Business AM, CBN rate opposition waves in Naira redesign policy push to curb inflation, counterfeiting and terrorism. It's a necessary step, says Mogado, that is the former Vice CBN governor. Other stories still on the Business AM, we have some companies and business. Unilever Nigeria, third quarter grows by 30%. Shell all on light up Nigeria, wealth potential in agro waste, that is under the commodity and agriculture. If any of the story that is of interest to you.
On the Nigerian News Direct, all eyes on Oshun as tribunal begins hearing proper today. NAFDAC debacle, this is coming from CIBN. And the big sister stresses good for still on 2023. Serap asks Atiku, Tinubu, Obi, and others to publish sources of their campaign for funding. Kogi governor asks security agencies to invite Natasha Udogan for questioning. This is still on
2023. Afenifere backtracks, endorses Tinubu. 60 killed in Indiana breach. Kolanjo, ex-Colombian president, African Development Bank lead new job creation effort, for which you can find on page 28 of the Leadership newspaper. We are having president, and we have that big capture that says our stand, security alert by the U.S. Embassy, who gains? And if you want to know more about that, because in the past few days, Nigerians have been on the edge over a series of security alerts issued by the Embassy of the United States of America in Nigeria for its citizens. And then the first alert was on October 23rd. And this is really a conversation that have been going on and on, Rachel. So I believe that this is a story that everybody should read. This is not just a story actually too, but this is the reality we are having,
is.
the issue of security and then how we need to be safe. And I'm happy, just like there's this previous paper we read where we saw that the military have actually killed a number of Boko Haram.
They have,
But
yes.
each time we read this, we get to see on the news, I want to see the dead bodies of this Boko TV. We
Of
see it on the
course.
papers. These are the bodies of the people
Of
that were
course.
killed, because it will be important that we have this. And even if we run to the rescue of Nigerians, it's not an issue where we see a call and then at the end of the day, after ringing over and over and over, keep our eyes and our ears very sharp to anything that is happening. We also have to play our own part to see
Yeah, we
what we
do.
can do.
Of
And that's why we keep saying, when you see anything, say something. Do not just be quiet, especially when you see any strange
Exactly.
face around you. And I think that's all on the leadership newspaper. But before we move further, let's take a time out. The weather is cold in Jos City and anywhere you are. So when we come back, we'll take a tea break and then we'll come back, we'll open the phone lines and you can call us and let us hear what you feel about any of the story that's of interest to you. Do not go anywhere. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back. If you're just tuning in, the program still is the Dailies on Echo Television International, where we bring you the breaking news on our papers review. And I'm Sela Elisha, your host, and my co-host so far have been Rachel. Thank you, Rachel, for doing
You're
this with me.
welcome, Sarah.
Yes, right at this moment, we have opened the phone line. So we'd love to hear from you. What do you feel about the redesign of the Naira note? Did you think this is the right step forward? And also looking at security, the internal crisis in the various parties, especially the PDP, where we can see it seems as if Wike is actually poking his hand in the eye of the chairman, that is IU. So we need to hear what you have to say about any of the story that is of interest to you. We're also live on Facebook, so you can drop your comment there and then we'll read it real time. Let's move to other papers, Rachel.
On the New Telegraph, still on Naira redesign, CBN acting on my orders, says Buhari. Senate uncovers unaccounted 2.2 billion Naira service-wide votes in Justice Ministry. Why we can't pay 1.8 billion severance benefit to Shackles ex-staff by BPE, and you can read that on page 5. And then NAMA NCAA's office face demolition, and you can read that on page 28. And the big story on New Telegraph, Southeast governors raise the alarm over insecurity in the region. Calls for political solution to Kanu's issue, set to form joint patrols. Military repels terrorist attacks on cantonment and kills 15 in Niger, Kaduna, and warns residents to remain indoors till further notice. We're battle ready in Bauchi. Buhari calls for emergency security meeting. And if you want to read more of that, go to page 4, 5, 8, and 28 of the New Telegraph. Still on 2023, Afenifera leader blesses Tinubu as Middle Belt Forum reiterates support for Obi. Atiku, Tinubu, Obi, Kwankwaso scramble for North's vote. And you can find that too on page 2, 4, 9, and 10 of the New Telegraph. Still on the New Telegraph, Glitz as New Telegraph unveils 2022 award winners. If that story interests you, you can find that on page 2. And the last story, Nupeng writes Lagos governor and then warns petrol scarcity may linger. And you can find that on page 4. And that's all the news on New Telegraph.
On the Punch newspaper, big story, CBN destroy over 6 trillion naira banknotes under Buhari. With the rider, Apex Bank spent 3.88 billion naira to dispose mutilated banknotes in 5 years. Naira slumped to 785 naira per dollar as reserve dip. Local currency faces more pressure. President defends Emefiele as criticism mounts against the Naira redesign. You can read that on page 26 of the Punch newspaper. And we have on Lagos Ibadan Expressway, students fundraise ransom, kidnap meets release. Buhari to meet security chief, postpone event, soldiers kill terrorists in Kaduna. Terror bombing, Somali to fly critical injured victims abroad, death toll now 104. Countries condemn attack, Buhari, Pope orders mourn 161 soul stampede victims, and you can read on page 2, 4, 5, and 14 of the Punch newspaper. Picture story here, we can see still on the Lagos Ibadan traffic, motorists, motorists on one way, compound gridlock. This is really going on for long, and I hope that that road will be fixed early to make transportation easy. Oil earning crashed by 288 billion naira in the third quarter. This is a report coming from the federal government. And we have Senate probes the Attorney General of the Federation, Madam's ministry, over 2.2 billion naira expenditure, which you can find on page 10. And that is all on the Punch newspaper.
On the Nigerian Tribune, Wike dares IU over a term. Others vows to expose more dirty deals, to travel to Turkey to fine-tune strategies, and you can read that on page 3. Southeast governors meet in Enugu, decry rising insecurity in the zone, and the writer says pull out joint security patrol of highways by December, and you can read that on page 25. And the big story is still on terror alert. Operation Stop and Search begins as NAS and Buhari summon security meeting, and the writer says senator reps to use presidential gate. FCTA bars vigilante from using firearms. Earmarks 500 million naira for community policing. Articles foreign engagement to yield massive investment and jobs. This is coming from the campaign organization. Military repels attack on army barracks, kills 8 suspected Boko Haram members in Niger. You can read that on page 4. NDLEA arrests opioid pills, 1,251 kg of skunk. Tinubu visit Fashoran Yoruba leaders in Akure, presents to them policy document action plan for a better Nigeria. Those present at the Akure blessing are majority. Those who have distant ties with Afenifera. This is coming from Akin Anibide. Still on the Nigerian Tribune, CBN has my backing on Naira redesign. This is coming from Buhari. People with money buried won't like it, he says. Naira strums to $780 at parallel market, and you can find that on page 6. And that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On the Daily Sun newspaper, Southeast governors raise alarm over insecurity, says the federal government intervention. And the writer following that story, joint security team to patrol zone, wants political solution on Kano, which you can find on page 6 of the Daily Sun newspaper. Tinubu present manifesto to Fatoranti and others. The big story, Abuja residents live in fear amid the tight security. Worship centers record low attendance. Government stop Abuja vigilante from bearing firearms. You can read that too on page 8. On 2023, Atiku more grounded in grassroots politics than Tinubu. This is coming from the PDP national youth leader. Zibanjo, ex-Colombian president, African Development Bank, lead new job creation efforts in Africa. Ohaneze backs Akere Dodo on Amoteku, urges Osun governor-elect to include Igbo in government, which you can read on page 6. And Lagos transporters begin 7-day strike today, says no going back. And I hope they look into their plight so that they can go back to work. You can find that story on page 4. Nigeria defeat Germany to claim the bronze in the under-17 Women's World Cup for the sport lovers. You can get the Daily Sun and read that story on page 30. And then we are still having Tinubu, Atiku, Obi, others asked to publish sources of campaign funding. And I think this is really, really important that we know their source of money on how they intend to fund their campaign. The last story is still on Wiki collusion. Dare you to stop Autumn and others. You can read that story on page 29 of the Daily Sun newspaper. And that's all on the Daily Sun.
On the business day, Fitch reaffirms Lagos at AAA. National long-term rating upgrade to AAA with a stable outlook. The only AAA-rated sub-national government in Nigeria. And the big story, cash crunch killing small businesses. And you can continue with that story on page 30 of the business day. Fitch sees increased social instability with Tinubu's victory. And you can find that story too on page 20. Governors snooze as states face fiscal crisis. Foreign exchange loses cause NNPC 124 billion naira in 2 years. And you can read more of that on page 21. And that's all the news on business day.
Let's take a look at the Vanguard newspaper then. Nigeria loses 70,000 barrels of crude daily. This is coming from the minister. And if you will ask my candid opinion about this, I feel we do not want to know how much Nigeria lost daily, the crude oil we lost, but rather we want to see on the paper how are we intending to save this.
Exactly.
I mean, this has been going on for long. Imagine losing 70,000 barrels of crude oil daily. This can go along with actually save us to meet up the quota that we are needed to meet for the OPEC. This can actually help us with the fuel scarcity we are having in the country. This can actually even make us to even realize that we need to even fix our own local refineries so we don't have issues of oil leaving the shores of Nigeria illegally. So I think this should not just be on the paper. I have said this, and I think that a serious meeting and also interrogation needs to go on for us to know how these barrels of oil keep missing. How do we keep losing such a huge, looking at the amount of oil daily, and yet we have the Navy, yet we have the Marine Police, yet we have the Custom. So you begin to ask questions, how is all this thing happening without them noticing all of this, except if some of them are involved in this, and that is the only way this can be possible. I know that we always have snitches in these various sectors, and then when you try to speak, you are being silent because you are trying to expose them. But I think we should not give up. If we want to be patriotic Nigerians that we are, I think we need to expose this. I think this is where we need the whistleblowers to actually blow those that are involved in this, and then I hope that when that is done, they will be protected, and that those that are involved will actually be brought to book, that the rule of law will actually take its full course at the end of the day.
Because Sele, I like something that you said, like we just have the habit of always saying the problem and nobody is mentioning the solution. We always have experts saying Nigeria is losing this is happening, this and that. You know what? We already know the problem. Even a blind man can see the problem in Nigeria. We need a solution. It's high time we start having news about the way forward, not the problems. Like, we already know them. We don't need to keep wallowing in them and just keep. It's more of complaining. Oh, the CBN is doing this. Oh, this person is losing this. And no, we need solutions. Okay, the government needs to come and tell us solutions. And even these experts and analysts that keep telling us what will happen if so is not done. Tell us what should be done to avoid the bad from happening. Like, we are already in this situation. There are no doubt. It's high time we start knowing our solution. We already know the problems. We already know it. We know where it's coming from. It's obvious. This theft is too massive for us to think it's just an ordinary thief. Nobody will come out clearly and say, okay, I know the thief. Nobody will come out and say, I know the government is involved. Nobody will come and say, because we're all like, oh, people get silent. But then the truth is that we know the problem. We don't have to say it. What's the solution? I think I'm looking forward to such on our newspaper. I'm looking forward to our analysts. I'm looking forward to the government coming to tell us the way forward, and that's what Nigerians need at this moment. Some kind of hope.
Of course, of course. Well, let's look at other stories still on the Vanguard newspaper. On 2023, visionary leadership, not eto-religious category, will drive needed development coming from NNPP. And on other geopolitical zone in Nigeria will also take this step to carry back Emifele over the Naira redesign, expand caution on the interface by fiscal and monetary authorities, which you can read on page 34. We have a story here that says new interest rate regime drives up investment in the federal government saving bonds. And we have studying out equity real sector. This is coming from analysts. So you can actually look at the graph from January to September. What have been the subscription value of the federal government saving bond? Are we actually gaining? How was it from the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter? And also compare that of last year to that of this year. And then we'll be able to know if we're actually growing in that sector. NAFDA dismisses claims of mercury in vaccine and administered to children. If you want to read more of that, check page 9 of the Vanguard newspaper. And for the third quarter, Dangote increases cement sale by 6.2% to 20.8 MT, which you can find on page 9. And on the terror alert, anxiety grows. Buhari holds emergency security meeting today, which you can find on page 34. And I hope this meeting will bring out results, and then we'll have more intelligence on how we need to protect our country from all of these terrorists. Military kill 8 terrorists in attempt to attack Niger cantonment, which you can find inside the paper too. And we have service-wide votes, how Justice Ministry failed to account for the 2.2 billion naira collected between 2017 to 2021. And this is coming from the Senate. So we hope to see what the lawmakers will have to say about it, what will the judiciary do about that, and then they will probe into what really happened to such amounts of money. Ozibanjo, ex-Colombian president, African Development Bank, lead new job creation effort with carbon market. You can read that on page 8 of the Vanguard newspaper, and that's all on the Vanguard.
On the Business Standard, Prime Minister adds 2 maritime patrol aircraft to Navy fleet. 100% online delivery system at CTG port from tomorrow. And the big story there saying digitizing and modernizing custom key to CTG's port regional hub ambition. And this is from the LNG, getting it costly, leaving it costlier. Huge default loans and acute risks for Bangladesh banking sector. This is coming from the IMF. And that's all the news on the Business Standard.
All right, let's take a look at an international paper, which is the Daily Express. And the story that grabbed my attention here is food prices could raise even higher as Putin breaks grain deal, which you can see on page 16 and 17. And this is really going to affect countries that have actually been depending. And I think we are one of those countries that have actually depended, even though we know some have actually cut their, would I say, relationship with Russia as a result of the war they are having with Ukraine. But then we can see that we're seeing that food prices could actually go very high because of the grain deal that the president have actually put. So I think this should serve as an eye-opener. What can we do? A lot of experts have been saying we need to inject more attention and more money into the agri sector, because this is a sector that can save us. It has been the sector that has saved us from recession over and over again. So if such a sector can actually save a whole country that actually depend on oil, and oil could not defend us or could not actually bring us out of recession, then I think this should be the time where we can see we need to do more. And I keep talking about it. Breaks my heart when you look at, we are not even practicing mechanized farming in the country presently. We have just 1% mechanized farming. 89% of it is being powered by humans, and then we have just about 10% by animals. So that means basically the food we consume mostly is being farmed by humans, and we know how it could be very tedious and tiring. So I hope that the government will look into what we need to do into mechanized farming. The rains is already going. We're having the dry season. Farmers will be going to irrigation farming, which I think that is where we get most of our vegetables, because they do not need so much water. So I think this is the period where the government, not just the federal federal government, even the state government, down to the local government level, see what can we do to inject into this agri sector. And then we'll be able to see that we'll not even get so bothered about having nations that are saying they want to cut out relationship with us because of hope that we'll look into that in our own country.
Sele, there was that's just it just says one thing, that we need to wake up. Sele, like the more we read these news, the more we analyze them, we just see that we just have to wake up. It's not like it's security. We're battling with many factors that won't even allow us to grow. So we just need to wake up and do what needs to be done, and in no time Nigeria will flourish if we will all wake up.
Of course. So we all need to wake up. Still on Daily Express, fears UK will lose police to dream jobs in Australia, which you can find on page 8 and 7. That means it's not only Nigeria that are having the citizens leaving. We are having UK also having their police leaving to Australia. The big story here: horror petrol bomb attack on migrant center. Laughing attacker hauls 3 devices at busy Dover facility before killing himself. I think we're having this issue of terrorism almost everywhere in the country, not just in Nigeria, but also in the nation and other countries outside. Well, and that's all on the Daily Express newspaper.
And the Punch Sports Extra, we have Arsenal 5, Nottingham Forest 0, and we can see a story on Mbappe. And then there's Spalletti hails hat-trick hero Osimhen. And from Ronaldo, United return disastrous. Saka forced off injured against Spurs. And then we have Tuchel admits Chelsea's spells ended too early. And then there's a big story. Look who scored again. Lookman fires Atlanta to second with 5th Serie A goal. And Onyekuru Owadike also on target. Online hero Akpom Viola tax Newcastle top 4. And that's all the news on Sponge Sports Extra.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for doing this with me.
You're welcome.
Thank you to our viewers. Thank you for always being supportive and also always praying for the station. Thank you to our crew members and for everyone that is always there to make sure that this program goes live. But I would love to leave you with this. Remember that excellence is not just an act, but it's a habit. So you need to form that habit to excel in anything you do. Have a blessed day ahead.